Thanks everyone for joining today. So Alejandro and I both are from the consulting part of Deloitte. You may know Deloitte's a huge firm. We're both consultants. You'll hear a bit more about our backgrounds. We're both alums. We're both in client service. So today we thought, to Kelly's point, we want to talk about what is consulting. So Alejandro is going to kind of demystify. He doesn't like that word, but he's going to demystify consulting. When I was here, I'll tell you, I didn't avail myself of any of these opportunities, and I just started interviewing, and I had no idea what consulting was. It's kind of worked, I guess. But I'm just going to talk about what is consulting kind of generally and provide some client examples. I'm going to provide an overview of the firm, and in that we're going to get to a bit about the strategy and operations practice, which is what we typically what we recruit for here. I'll explain that, and to Kelly's point, I'll talk a bit about career progression at Deloitte, kind of show you where you come into the firm and talk about expectations of the various levels and so forth. Then we're going to show you a slide of the upcoming dates and some of the other activities. And tomorrow we're doing a Cracking Cases workshop that anyone who's interested in applying here or with any larger firms, I'd encourage you to attend. I also lead our undergrad recruiting at Penn State. And at Penn State, we do 4 case interviews. So anyone who gets through the Penn State interviews at undergrad has to go through 4 case interviews. On campus here, we do 2. We'll do one day 1. At the end of day 1, everyone gets scored and evaluated. And the folks who come through to day 2 we'll do another case as well. So what we've seen over the years to advertise tomorrow a bit more is that the case is really quite often a differentiator. Behavioral is usually fantastic for everybody. We hear about your experiences, and there's usually thought about where the fit is. But the differentiator, almost inevitably, when we debrief, is the case interview. And I will say that at Penn State last week, we had a student that had a 389 in electrical engineering, and a student was 4.0 in econ, who didn't get offers because they didn't make it through our client case study. So no more. I don't want to scare you anymore, but I'd encourage you to come. Alejandro and Sadie Conrad, who's not here today but will be here tomorrow, also an alum, are going to do that. So it'd be great if they don't walk into an empty room. So Alejandro, maybe do your background first. And,
sure. So hi everyone, my name is Alejandro Garcia. I graduated from here in 2014, so it's been 3 years at the firm now. I'm currently based out of Boston. My client is currently up in New Hampshire. So background was in politics and economics, then came here for my MPA and have been at the firm since.
Great. So as I mentioned, I'm John Rampula. I'm a managing director in the strategy and operations practice. I've been with the firm, I hit 18 years a couple weeks ago. My focus has been predominantly state government clients. Back when we were building a higher education practice, we now have a higher education practice. I spent 2 years working with higher education clients. I'll give a lot of examples of my experiences. Current clients, I have a revenue client in the state of Indiana where we're helping them with a new operating model. We had a client here in New York where we actually created a new agency for that client. I have a Supreme Court client, a state Supreme Court client where we're doing an IT operations review. Talk a bit in depth about some of those experiences in the past, but I've got a lot of experiences. I worked in 7 states for 5 higher education institutions over my 18 years. So done a lot of travel, and I actually interviewed Alejandro and Sadie. So with that, Alejandro is going to talk to you about what is consulting.
Yep, so I'll be honest, I remember it wasn't in this room, I think it was over there somewhere. But a few years ago, being here and having absolutely no clue what consulting was, right? I'd seen Up in the Air, and I'd seen Bob and Bob in Office Space, so that's about as far as I got with consulting, which entertaining, but not really what we actually do. So at their core, consultants are really advisors, right? We're problem solvers. So whenever a business or an organization has an issue, we come in and try to help understand what's going on, formulate a solution, and then implement that solution. So within the public sector specifically, most of the reasons why we're brought in is because the agencies themselves don't always have the skills or the background necessary to implement a solution. For example, If a state legislature passed a law that like enhanced the grants program of an actual agency, right? And like let's say they doubled it. Because of the short timeline, they might not have the people and the skills necessary to know how to manage all that money, and then that's when we would come in and help them not only do like the implementation side of things, but also the operating model. You know, how do we understand what success is within this new program? How do we create processes that support our goals and our objectives, and then actually put that into practice with either an implementation or an operating model design. So in general, it's helping make the most out of the assets that the agencies have, and then filling in those holes, understanding where may have gaps and where we can assist them. There is no mold for a consultant, right? Not all consultants are Bob and Bob. Hopefully none of our consultants are Bob and Bob, to be honest. But there are certain things and certain skills that that most successful consultants share. Education-wise, there is a wide background. Most of the people have some sort of background in economics or business, a lot of engineers, surprisingly, and a lot of people like us, like MPXs they call it, so MPA or MPH or some sort of background like that. But what everybody shares is really like an inquisitive mind. What you'll see and what I found in the firm is everybody really likes to take complex issues and try to understand them and think critically through them. And that's a really necessary skill to be successful, because you will get a lot of new and different things thrown at you on a regular basis. From a skill set point of view, part of it is, I'd say there's like two buckets. One is like on the analytical side, which is really being able to take large amounts of data and distilling that into like key pieces of actionable information, and then being able to communicate that successfully to your client so that it's not just a big spreadsheet with random numbers, but it's actually something that they can digest and say, oh, okay, so this is why it matters to me, and now these are the actions and the steps that I'm going to take in order to change this or improve the functioning of my agency. On the other side, the other bucket I would say is leadership. A lot of our people have shown leadership in the past in multiple capacities, and the way the firm is structured, they really encourage you to take the initiative, right? Everybody that's on the project, regardless of level, can take the initiative and say, hey, like, I was talking to this person and I see this issue here, like, how are we addressing it? How we talk with the client about this? And really take a proactive approach to how we deliver, because that's where the value actually lies. And then finally, on the personality traits, flexibility is key for sure. You will, and this is what I love about consulting, right? No 2 days are really the same. It's definitely not the kind of place where you're going to be going into the same cubicle and the same desk and having all of your things right there every single day. There are things that are going to be changing, and being able to roll with the punches and be flexible is very important. The other thing is being able to manage uncertainty, and there is a certain level of uncertainty that you want to know how to manage on that side. But oh, I thought I was going to be in New Hampshire, but now I'm in Texas. Or oh, I thought I was going to be doing this list of things, and now the priorities have changed completely, and I need to adjust to that. And also the level of uncertainty with not being able to work with like perfect information. I remember when I first started, one of like the frustrating, hard things for me was understanding that you don't always have all the data that you want, and you don't always have the time to get all the data that you want, and you want to be able to be comfortable making the best decision possible with the information that's available to you. And finally, strong interpersonal skills. It is a client-facing role, so you want to make sure that you're, have those interpersonal skills, are able to keep your conversation, are able to be professional, and have that kind of practice. So, in practice, what do we actually do? I know consultant means a lot of things to a lot of different people. For the most part, 80% of your day is really going to be doing client service, right? So that's going to, for me, that's my client up in New Hampshire, which is the Health and Human Services Agency. I'm there on site 4 days a week, and that takes up most of my time. Then beyond that, I'd say like 10% of the things that I do outside of the client site is going to be personal development. So that's going to be courses that the firm offers that you can take, which I actually think they do a pretty good job at providing courses that are relevant and actually interesting, so they're not like the tedious kind of things. And then the firm does a lot of really cool workshops and tries to bring people together. For example, just last week I was down in Texas at our campus, which is called Deloitte University, and they basically brought together all the public sector practitioners, most of the public sector practitioners, I should say, from across the country, and we had 2 days where we were just talking about, okay, so what's going on in the public sector at Deloitte? What are the things that we are looking to do? What is the state of our practice? And then getting to meet a lot of people. Since everybody travels, you don't always get to see people every day, so they do a really good job at bringing people together like that. Beyond that, another 5% is probably market development type work. So you get the opportunity to not only serve the client where you're at and deliver work, but also support the firm as we look for new opportunities. For example, myself, I'm helping another partner with our robotic process automation and cognitive automation practice. So seeing ways in which we can embed that into the way we deliver services and do a better job at being more accurate and higher quality. And I'm also currently responding to a request for information from the state of Vermont. They're looking to put in a new integrated eligibility system, and we're doing okay, so how do I go about deciding what's the key criteria? How do I go about deciding who do I choose to help me through this process? So that's another 5%. And then the last part, as with every job, you have to do timesheets, you have to do the travel expenses and that sort of thing. So that's in general what you do. What your week will usually look like varies a little bit depending on the client site that you're at. I am very, very fortunate. I hope John doesn't hate me for saying this, but I live in Boston, right? And my client is up in New Hampshire. So I get to wake up at the very reasonable hour of 6:30 on Monday and then just drive downtown, pick up a car, drive up, and I'm at the client site by 9 o'clock if traffic is terrible. So that's ideal, and I like it. I'm very happy with that. But for the most part, you'll travel a little bit further. Usually they try not to do the coast-to-coast type of things. But for the most part, you'll be traveling in the morning. You get to the client site around 10 to 12. Prepare for whatever's going on the next week and prepare for meetings and whatnot. And then Monday afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday morning, you're really on site. What on site means varies a little bit from project to project. Because we're in the public sector, clients have a large variability with how comfortable they are with either people working remotely or working maybe non-traditional hours. For example, my client, they're not mean about it, but they definitely want to have us present and on site 8:30 to 5:30 with everyone else. So the ask, unless you're traveling, is that you keep those hours. Other clients are a little bit more flexible with maybe a little later start or a little earlier end. And then Thursday afternoons, you'll be flying back. Most of the time, most of the people that I know are back home usually by 8 at the latest. And then on Fridays, you really get to be in your home office. I'm fortunate enough to be in the Boston office, which is a really great, very active office. So we usually have happy hours going on in the afternoons, and you get to go and meet the other people that work at the firm that aren't on your project site and get to interact with them, and then do a little bit more remote work and networking and the personal development type of work. So with that, we'll start talking about Deloitte itself.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Alejandro. So I'm going to talk a bit about Deloitte. But what I thought is, before I talk about who we are, it'd be good to meet you. So what I'd like to do is we could do some introductions. And before today, you've probably thought about something you want to leave here with, or something you're not sure about. Either what is consulting, or something about the firm. And if it's something about the firm, it'll be great, because I'll spend more or less time on some of the upcoming slides to make sure I answer your questions. After I start going through this, though, feel free to stop me at any time and ask a question while it hits you. We'll also do a Q&A afterwards as well. But so with that, in typical consulting form, we got to put somebody on the spot. So I guess we'll start here. So if you could introduce yourself, and if there's anything that you want to walk away from today's presentation with, that'd be great.
My name's Ryan Pencil, MPA Class 18. I spent 14 years in the Army. I don't have anything really to take away from this. I have a bunch of classmates that are with Deloitte and the other consultancy firms, so I'm pretty familiar with all this.
I retired as a reserve JAG officer 3 years ago, 23 years. So
yeah, I'm a major in the reserves right now.
Great, great, all right.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm also class of 18. Unlike him, I'm fresh out of undergrad. I love studying local politics. I did a lot of debating back in college, so I love that sort of thing.
All right, cool. Where'd you go to undergrad?
Elon University, go Phoenix.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
all right, all right.
Hi, Chris Pulliam, MPA, came straight out of undergrad. I did my undergrad also at SU, and I just want to get a better sense of public sector consulting.
Okay, good.
My name is Phil Porter, MPA 18, also graduated from SU this year, and I basically know that consulting is a good option for especially a lot of people that lead this program, but I'm more interested in like getting specific details and seeing on moving forward.
Okay, and I think Alejandro can provide a lot of that today. So yeah, and if you don't hear it, just ask us another question and remind us at the end, all right?
Seth Walter, I am a MPA student as well, graduated this year. I come from doing 7 years in the performing arts industry prior to this. Also graduated from Colorado State. I'm actually good friends with Sadie, so look forward to seeing her tomorrow.
All right.
And I have a vague idea what consulting is and what she does, so I was looking for a little bit more specific details about
Okay, all right. She has a very unique hobby that you're probably aware of.
trapeze.
Yeah, she'll ask her about her trapeze
I've
and
got-
have her show you the little thing on her phone. It's amazing what she does on a trapeze.
Actually, back in summer camp, I had the chance to be able to do a couple of circus shows, so I would love to talk to her about
Usually, it scares me just watching the video, but she'll show you. Yeah. All right.
Hi, my name's Rachel Baker. I'm also an MPA student. Before this, I was working in a nonprofit education sector, and mostly I just wanted to know what Deloitte does and what consulting is.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Carolina Antigua. I am also straight from undergrad. I'm also an MPA student, and I'm really interested in the intersection between Deloitte and the health field.
Okay. All right.
I'm Chelsea. I'm also an MPA student. I did my undergrad here a couple years ago, and I am just interested in learning about what makes Deloitte unique to other consulting firms and what makes it.
Alejandro makes she needs.
Hi, I'm Jessica O'Neill. I am also an MPA. I am been working for like the last 7 years in New York City with nonprofits and social enterprise. I'm here to learn just more about Deloitte's impacts on your local governance and state agencies.
I'm Chris Markwood from Alexandria, Virginia. I also went to Deloitte University. After college, I spent about 5 years working in the political consulting industry in DC. Just kind of interested in learning about some of your different clients and specific projects like this.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth DeJoseph. I'm an MPA student as well, graduating in this upcoming spring. Prior to coming to Maxwell, I was at the American Dental Association working in their marketing communications department. And prior to that, I worked in local government for 6 years doing government relations, focusing in local government finance issues, particularly in infrastructure projects.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Luis Escaloza. I'm also an MBA student, and I'm here to learn a bit about consulting and also the kinds of projects that Deloitte takes on for state and local governments. Specifically, transportation is my interest.
Okay.
My name is Charlie. I'm a master's student of Deloitte, and I'm interested in what is consulting and what is for government.
My name is Joe Leader. I'm doing ENTA. I'm interested in state and local government finance. Previously, I worked in several NGOs and government. Deloitte was our client before as auditor, external auditor. So I know Deloitte as an audit firm.
You do the audit side, yes. Yeah.
Now I'm interested to know what kind of services they provide to the government.
Great. Okay.
My name is Jasmine Jackson. I went to Syracuse undergrad, and then I went to Ohio State and got my law degree and my master's in public policy. I worked for about 5 years doing corporate law in oil and gas, and right now I'm at Maxwell getting a CAS in Health Services Policy and Management, and I'm very interested in what Deloitte does with regard to healthcare reform and cybersecurity issues specifically, and whether or not it's something that Deloitte sees himself in the future. Things like that.
My name's Boone. Like everybody else, I'm kind of here to learn a little bit more specifically about what Deloitte does. I have some friends that work for Deloitte, and because of the client and project confidentiality, they kind of like to speak pretty broadly, so I don't have a very clear understanding of what it is that you do. And so I would like to learn, hopefully, about some specific projects.
Okay. And when we give examples, sometimes we'll be a little more broad, but a lot of the work we do is matter of public record anyway, so we'll probably talk, but some of the things we talk about, we probably want to keep inside the room, but we'll be as candid as we can, absolutely.
My name is Taylor Hamilton. I'm an MPA IR student, graduated this year. I am a reformed pharmacy student as well, recovering from the University of Kentucky, and I'd like to learn more about the expertise and practice areas.
Okay. All right.
I'm Rachna. I'm from India, and I'm also an MBA graduate student, and I've also looked Deloitte as an audit firm because that's what they do most in India. I'm curious about the private consulting part.
We have these two huge consulting in Mumbai and Hyderabad in India. There are huge consulting offices there.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm an MPA IR student, and I'm here to learn more about Deloitte's public sector practice.
Hi, my name is Gaurav. I'm from India, and I'm doing MPA here with Maxwell. I've already done my MBA from India, and I've worked with Ernst & Young for 4 years, more than 4 years. So I know all the big fours, how they work in the Indian domain, with the government, with the private consulting, non-consulting audit. So I would want to know how exactly Deloitte is working in the US, and especially with the government side, or what's happening there in that domain.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Shiana. I have two degrees on my right, finance and IT, and I have master in information technology. I used to be IT manager, and I did a lot with PwC, FPNT, as a consultant. And I will graduate from EMP in December.
December, okay.
And I'm looking to understand more how public administration sector be a consultant.
Hi, my name is Kushmut. I am from Uzbekistan. I have a background in IT sphere. I was working at the government agencies doing projects, IT projects. Here I am studying EMPA, and I'm taking course of statistics, policy analysis. So I'm curious about how this consultation group may be useful if I study quantitative analysis. So in my understanding, the consultation group is working with the data sets, databases, analysis.
We may not talk a lot about them, but we have a huge data science group. Actually, we have a data analytics, it's called a greenhouse. It's in Boston. It's a really cool spot. We've got a bunch of data scientists and data visualization folks, and then in Rosslyn, Virginia as well. So our clients are trying to grapple with a lot of these data issues. You know, about all this data, how do I use it? How do I use it more effectively? And how to use it to better serve citizens? So directly one of the issues that we're looking to help our clients with. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Miles Golson. I work here as the Global Programs Coordinator. I haven't seen Deloitte presentation for a while, so I thought I'd check it out.
You picked the wrong guy to watch. I am totally off script, so don't let this cloud your judgment a little bit.
Well, I do recommend Deloitte pretty frequently because it's all over the world. Mainly work with students who want to work internationally, so IR students, but also MPAs that want to kind of take their degree globally.
Thanks for coming. Sure. Hi,
Nathan Gerald. I'm a JD MPA student, Army veteran. So I'm just interested in learning more about the sort of consulting work you do in the public sector.
Okay. So it sounds like you want to hear a lot more about experiences and a little bit less about our structure. So I'm going to move kind of quickly through a number of these slides, and we'll give you some a bit more about our client experiences. There's a couple slides toward the end that Alejandro can really kind of give you some input on that. So as far as the firm, we are a global firm, and the way we're structured legally, every country has its own country practice, more or less. That's kind of easy way to look. So we're here from Deloitte US, and as folks have mentioned, we have multiple services. We're here representing Deloitte Consulting. We have a tax group that does tax planning, tax policy. We have an advisory group and we have the audit group. The advisory group has a real niche expertise in cybersecurity. So our real cybersecurity experts sit within our advisory practice, and they're kind of market leaders. They've been called, for instance, there was a state a few years ago, 2 states within the past 5 years have fairly big security breaches. And like one of the first firms they called was ours. And because they were security breaches, I can't tell you what states they were, but that practice is really top of mind as far as cybersecurity. We work, as you can imagine, because we're a large firm across industries. Alejandro and I are part of the public sector practice, and within public sector, we also do some higher education work. Most of the folks that come off campus here will work in our state government practice. You may have an opportunity to do a higher education project, but we're predominantly here representing the state government practice. Higher ed is still a growing area within the firm. This is important to MBA students, but not so much MBA students, and we serve like 80% of the Fortune 500. We're in a lot of Fortune 500 firms. We've worked, what we should show you is, I think we've worked in 45 or 47 of the states in the US. And there's a reference to a Fortune magazine. We've been one of the 100 best companies to work for 8 years in a row, but we have been recognized for diversity programs in Working Mother magazine. We look across the board, both sort of public publications as well as evaluators kind of consistently rate us as being, we highly excel in the services we deliver, but also we'll talk a bit about, and it's very important, the diversity programs and some of the experience that we all have with nonprofit work as well, like in part of that 20% of the time when we're not doing client work. Again, I'll move through this fairly quickly, but the way we're structured within the state government practice, we call them service areas, but it's probably easiest to just think of them as competency areas. So we have 3 major competency areas within the firm. Alejandro and I are here representing the strategy and operations practice, and that's typically, again, the folks who get offers from Maxwell join the strategy and operations practice. There we do any number of things. I don't know how familiar you are with business process reengineering, but the term BPR was coined years and years and years ago by a Harvard professor. And believe it or not, today the concept of BPR, it's kind of morphed into Six Sigma, lean process improvement. States are still very, very, very interested in improving their operations for a variety of reasons. They're losing a lot of talent, right? Doing more with less. They want their folks more data focused, right? And less, entering data in systems, but more kind of extracting that data and figuring out how to use it. So BPR is still a large part of what we do. And BPR can be done kind of standalone. Sometimes states will come to us. I'm working for a client in the state of Indiana now who asked us back in 2015 to help them reassess their overall goals, mission, and vision. And after we did that, they said, we'd like you to stay because we kind of like this new vision, but we don't think our business processes are in line with that vision. So we then helped them redesign all their business processes. And now we're helping them with the procurement. They've asked the Indiana legislature for over $50 million to implement a new core tax processing system for the state, and then building business processes around that to help them both with their core operations, but with customer service. Operating model assessment, it's kind of a consulting buzz sort of word, but after you redesign all the business processes, you need to put them all together, right? And make sure that they all work. and to make sure that you've got an organization that can sit on top of that with folks in roles and responsibilities to make all that work. Operating model is really just kind of a next step or two above BPR. And I know we've talked about performance analytics. We do a lot of analytics work. I'll give you one example. I have a client in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, human services client, one of the largest human services agencies in the country. And the secretary of that agency meets every week with the various program heads of all the various human services programs, and they have performance metrics. And he asks them, and his performance metrics are aligned with his 5 strategic priorities. So on a rotating basis, they talk about one of those strategic priorities per week. So every 5 weeks, they would have covered all the strategic priorities and how the agencies are performing against metrics that they've set, against those metrics. Well, what they found was the agencies were coming in with hard copy documents, Excel documents, and they could give the secretary the metric, but they couldn't give the secretary any sort of insight as to why that metric is changing. They couldn't drive into that metric to see if that metric was kind of like a geographic anomaly or whatever. So what the secretary asked us to do was build the interactive dashboards that the agencies and programs could use to project their data, but then be able to drive into that data and slice and dice it and look at it from any number of dimensions, from demographics to geography, that gave them a whole lot of power that in the meetings, and the other thing that it's done now is because the secretary knows they can drive into that, they're preparing a little bit more for the meetings because they know now that I'll get back to you is probably not the right answer. So not only do we deliver this analytics data visualization solution, but you probably heard a lot about the cloud. We build it and we're delivering it in a cloud environment that Deloitte provides, and the state basically subscribes to that as a service. So it wasn't built on state infrastructure, it was built in the cloud, and their users log onto the cloud and use this data visualization tool. So one example about performance analytics. Talk a little bit lesser about the other 2 areas, just because we don't typically recruit here, but it's important for you to know these areas because we work day to day with folks from these other 2 service areas. It's very rare that we'll do a standalone straight S&O project that doesn't have either of these 2 components. And in fact, most projects we do have all 3 of these components. So human capital is the group within the firm that does a number of things. They help us with org design a lot of times, with business process, and they're the org design experts. We kind of get together and hash out and build new org models. Change adoption strategy is a huge amount of what they do in the public sector. Because if you think about the public sector, and I'm not disparaging the public sector, this is typically the way it works, is that the public sector has built a lot of IT systems and has been operating the same processes for years and years and years. Every so often, they'll decide it's time to change. And they may be changing 30-year-old IT systems or processes that have been around for many, many years. That change is very difficult for a lot of folks to embrace and adopt. And probably the absolute worst thing you can do is kind of go off in a corner and build a new operating model or a new system and then drop it on folks and say, we're going to go live with this tomorrow. So what change adoption strategy does is help people understand the change, basically from the time it's envisioned until the time it's implemented. So that along the way, people kind of move from just a general understanding of what that change is to by the time you go live, they're kind of embracing and adopting the change, which greatly helps your performance in the end. I'm talking a lot, so I'll talk a bit about technology. Technology is a lot of what you'd expect it to be. We have a lot of core technology practitioners that are out implementing technology systems. But this is more than just coding anymore. A lot of this is about strategy. States are asking us, and this is kind of the joiner of these 2, should I move to the cloud? What can I move to the cloud? Cybersecurity being a primary issue. Can I put PII up in the cloud? Or should I put PII in the cloud? Should I put protected health information in the cloud? Digital modernization. And when I was here like 5 years ago, our commercial practice was out delivering digital solutions to our commercial clients. States are now realizing that all of us as citizens are expecting the same sorts of services and interactions that we have with whether it's your bank, your credit card company. So states are really looking pretty aggressively into the digital mobilization. And 2 project examples. One is a project we did in Pennsylvania. The dashboards that we created, not only look pretty decent when you project them here, but we built them in a tool so that the secretary can be anywhere and pull them up on his mobile device, and they'll render in a format right on the screen that he's able to drill into. So if he's called the governor's office, he can answer those. A few years ago, we built an incident reporting system for the state of New York for people who might be either abused or neglected who are within the human services system here in the state that deploys on mobile devices for folks working out in those agencies, because they're not always right by their laptop to report an incident, but timeliness is so important to getting those incidents reported and then investigated, that we built a mobile app that allows them to, with a subset of the data that they would enter in their computer, to actually get that entered into an incident response center and an investigation started right away. So there are many examples, but commercial and public sector are really converging around technology. There's also a cost efficiency piece of some of this as well. It's pretty expensive to maintain these big old systems that states have built. They can achieve a lot of cost efficiency in the technology area with implementing new technologies. We'll spend a little less time on this. This is kind of about Deloitte and our culture, and I'm going to talk in detail about the career progression. But the way we operate, and I think this is an important question to ask everybody, is really who's looking out for my career, right? Who's helping me with my career? Ultimately, in any firm and anywhere, your career is kind of your own, but within the firm, we have a number of mechanisms to help you guide your career, and these are only a few. When you join the firm, you're going to be assigned an onboarding advisor or onboarding buddy, and that onboarding buddy will likely be very close in level to you, and I'll talk about levels in a little bit. That's a person you can ask all the questions that you might not want to ask like a more senior person. So as Al Hunter talked about earlier, like entering time and expenses. The first, you learn it in school, and then you go back and you have your first project and you hit your first expense, and you're like, I forget how to enter this. Those are the types of questions that are great to ask for your onboarding buddy. Or, how do I dress when I go to the office? Or who should I meet in the office? I mean, you could probably talk a bit about.
Where do I say? No, I remember my onboarding advisor had started just the year before me, and those first 2 weeks, I think I called him basically every day and was like, I just got to the office, where does everybody sit? I don't see anyone. He's like, oh yeah, that's because you're in the tax floor. I'm like, no, you don't go over there. You want to go to 14. And all this sort of stuff that you're not going to be, calling your director or your project partner to ask, and have those more candid conversations about, okay, now I'm here, how do I succeed as a practitioner? And they are usually 1 or 2 years just ahead of you, so they remember it pretty freshly.
Yeah. And the other thing with that onboarding buddy is quite often, because you're very similar levels, you kind of progress through the firm together. And they're great resources to call when you've got a question, a project question or issue that you want to have answered. So great. You also have a career counselor. And what the career counselor does is, because we're a large firm, the career counselor kind of works with you in defining your career goals and then a plan on how to achieve those goals. As Alejandro mentioned, 80% of your time is client service, but there are a lot of other things that we do in the firm, recruiting being one, with the writing proposals, we do a lot of that because that's how we get work in our business and public sector. So your counselor will help you map out and chart out year to year a plan, and then check in with you various times throughout the year to ensure that you're kind of on track, and also kind of be more of a senior advisor in your career. They also then represent you in the performance reviews, and a lot of people are interested in how performance works. So the short answer is your counselor represents you in performance reviews, and they represent sort of the sum total of all the work that you've done and your progress against the goals. And then you're kind of evaluated in against your peer group, so that as a consultant, and we'll look at the chart of the career progression later, you won't be evaluated against a manager or senior manager. You're always going to be evaluated against your cohort or your peer group, against the goals that you set, as well as some of the firm goals as well. Education, as Alejandro mentioned, is a huge part of what we do. Some years ago, the firm invested, I don't know how much money, and basically built a campus. It's called Deloitte University. It's in Westlake, Texas, which is outside of Dallas. It looks like a community college or bigger. You go to Deloitte University, and when you're there, you stay there. There's rooms there, single rooms, so no dorms. There's a cafeteria that has phenomenal food, right? I mean, the food, you have to check yourself on the food.
The mac and cheese, like actually at the barn, is amazing. It's also probably like the nicest hotel like I've actually stayed in, so I do not mind going there. It's really fun.
It's great because consultants help design it. So there are plenty of outlets to plug all your electrical devices in. There are switches above the bed for your late night readings, so you don't have to get out of bed and turn it off anywhere else. But they really thought of everything. And they're, in addition to the food, because you're going to eat too much, guaranteed, there's a great gym. I mean, there's a gym there that rivals probably some of the best gyms I've seen in my life. So while you're there, you're not kind of thinking about anything else. So there's a lot of time to study, a lot of time to meet colleagues and talk with colleagues. So it is great. We have, like many other firms too, any number of online opportunities. A lot of folks also go to a lot of conferences to stay current on issues in their particular interest areas. So human services conferences, health conferences. We send people to budgeting conferences. So you're learning the issues that are top of mind of our clients because they're typically state conferences. But you're also, kind of extending your skills. And the other piece that's really important to the career development is, just any number of firm initiatives, as I mentioned. At my stage of my career, I've had the opportunity to kind of work on every couple of years we refresh our strategy and operations plan. So because I'm so old, I get to work on that, which is really cool. Kind of help direct where the practice is going. But Alejandro mentioned the RPA stuff that he's doing. It's really pretty cool stuff. We're doing a lot with analytics now. So anyone who's got an interest in any particular topic area, you can likely find a firm initiative, kind of like a club in school, to join. And there's usually a partner, director, sponsor, and a lot of really interesting. One of the hard things that people have, I'll say, when you start to kind of balance the work and then this, is saying no. Because you come in and it all sounds so cool, and people start calling you, and it's really hard to say no. So one piece of advice I give you is kind of early on, and obviously saying no directly is probably not the way, but understand how to kind of balance everything. Because in addition to everything you have here on the screen, you have a personal life, right? Alejandro and I have personal lives we like to go back to. So it's easy, much like school, to let it consume you. So kind of early on, understanding, how to balance those things. And that's where your onboarding buddy, your counselor can help as well. Because it's easy to get consumed by all of this. So I talked earlier about some other opportunities outside of just the project work. We talked some about the initiatives. Community involvement is very important to the firm. And so much so that one day, at least one day a year, the firm more or less shuts down and everybody goes out and does a community service project. It's called Impact Day. This past year we repainted a couple fire stations in Harrisburg just because they couldn't get around to beautifying their fire stations. And at the end of the day, they were so thankful. I know, maybe you can talk about some of the things you've done.
So I usually try to switch on and off because you have two sets of projects, right? Like the physical work projects that are nice because it's a break from your day-to-day, and then a little bit more technical projects. So I'm actually part of the Hispanic network in Boston. So a bunch of our Hispanic practitioners across all the service lines and all the levels get together and we do all sorts of different things. And the project that we did, last time I did it was we actually went to, it's called Excel Academy. And basically we're teaching math to kids for the full day and just interacting with them and coaching them. And it was really great, and actually started a partnership with them that has been ongoing ever since. So Impact Day is really great. It's something really good that the firm does, but they definitely don't stop there, right? I've got involved with both the Excel Academy and the Big Brothers Big Sisters through the firm, and that's something that's ongoing throughout the year and not just on a single day. So great, but just part of what.
Yeah, it's one big day, but I think the importance of that day, I think that is it kind of sets the tone of a firm that's acceptance of doing community service, community involvement. We have ongoing, within my office, we have ongoing initiatives. Right now we have a literacy effort where we've asked folks to bring crayons and all kinds of sort of things for children. We're going to put little packages together and send out to some of the schools in the Harrisburg area who don't even have kind of the basic school supplies for their students. We're doing that. Every year the Harrisburg office does a food drive, and the number is unfathomable, the amount of food that people just bring in and then we distribute. And we do another really cool event, it was Adopt a Family. So we work with the Human Services Agency, and we get lists of some of the most sort of like underserved families most in need. And every project, and sometimes a project will adopt a couple of those families, and we buy Christmas gifts or holiday gifts for all the kids in the family and then deliver them to the children so that they can, at the end of the year, have that experience. Similar to Alejandro, I've had the opportunity to get involved in a number of initiatives. I'm on the Humane Society of Harrisburg. I sit on the board there. The firm supports that. Every spring, I can really connect with first graders, as I'm sure you can imagine. I teach a first grade class, so I've been asked back for 4 years in a row. So that doesn't happen in the evening. So I block my schedule. So for about 2 hours, every week for about 8 weeks, I teach a first grade class through Junior Achievement. I got exposed to the great things Junior Achievement does through one of my Impact Day experiences some years ago. So I'm very passionate about a community service and very supportive of it as well. I will kind of tear through these next few slides. Just kind of diving a little deeper into some of the issues that strategy and operations folks do. And I'm not a fan of a lot of text on PowerPoint, so if you're working on one of my projects, don't create a slide like this. But we'll talk about some of, and Alejandro can use some of our project experiences to kind of talk through some of the issues that our clients are dealing with. Maybe I'll start with higher ed, and Alejandro, you can do a few. In higher ed, my first touch with higher ed was actually back in like 2009. I came back from Iraq, the economy was tanking. The firm had no work in public sector because states weren't spending any money. But we had some former state clients who were out working in higher ed institutions, and their endowments, many of them, their endowments took a really, really, really hard hit back then. And they were starting to grapple with this whole efficiency idea. That, over years, some of them thought, well, we've got like duplicative services. Can we be more efficient? So because there was no state work, I kind of moved in and did some higher ed projects. Directly driven by the state of the economy at that time and their need to become more efficient, and did a number of higher education projects at the time, and it hit the whole way up to the Ivy League. I mean, 2 of the schools I worked with at the time were Ivy League schools whose endowments really took some big hits. So that is a direct example of how quickly kind of issues and forces in our economy can impact our clients very directly, generating a need then for kind of the outside expertise to come in and help them.
Well, as you all know, we live in a new world of technology, or so I've been told. And basically everything right now is like on your phone, right? Like literally everything that you need is on your phone. It's really easy to access. And recently, in the past few years, the public sector has been trying to catch up to that and to see how they can leverage that kind of technology to deliver better services. So one of my first projects actually in New Hampshire was working with the long-term care unit. It's a relatively small unit in New Hampshire, but they deliver very important services to a community that's dispersed in areas that aren't easily accessible. So I don't know how much you guys know about New Hampshire, but if you live in like Manchester, if you live in Nashua, not that hard to get to a DO or the district office, not that hard to go talk to your caseworker. But if you live in the North Country, you might not have internet, right? You might not have all these services around you, and that's where a lot of the elderly population lives. So it's a really big issue as to how do we get the district office to them and then continuously deliver services to the level that we would like. Beyond that, and this is a funny story, before we started, they were literally asked to move from the second floor of the building to the first floor because it was a structural hazard, the weight of the paper that they had on the second floor. So you can imagine, it's literally tons and tons of paper. And we helped create an online solution. So we helped them create an assessment that they could send out with their workers on their phone to the client, completed offline. and then come back into the office and upload it, and it would be automatically scored and come into the actual district office where they would go through and process the eligibility determination. And that made a huge difference, not only on the lives of the client, because it's difficult to ask someone who is 85 years old to like walk to the district office or ask their daughter or granddaughter to take them during the workday. It's much easier to say, hey worker, like take your phone, like do this on the phone or do this on your tablet, and then come back and upload it. So help them get services quicker, and then also definitely help the LTSS unit with all the paper processing and the application like lag times. So we do a lot of really interesting stuff around that area.
So economic uncertainty, you're all aware, many states are dealing with huge structural imbalances of budget. In Pennsylvania, we have a $2 billion budget gap and still don't have a spending plan. I think as of today, we still don't have a spending plan. So states are really having to grapple with, how do I change the mix of services I provide? Do I do some business process changes? So it directly hits our clients on a daily basis. Healthcare transformation, I will be woefully inadequate in my description here. I work across core government, which is a lot of the back office, general revenue fund agencies, and some human services. But in healthcare, Affordable Care Act was a huge, huge change. And we had a number of folks within our healthcare practices who were out in front, digesting and understanding what that legislation was and kind of following it through every iteration until it was passed. And at the time it was passed, we had a point of view on various options and how to implement the various provisions of the ACA, and a lot of our state clients asked us to do that. We talked about technology on the technology side. For those who stood up health insurance exchanges, we have, and not to tout, but we have the most successful experience in standing up health insurance exchanges across the country. In fact, there were a couple that were failing who called our folks in, given their expertise, to come in and write their bad projects. In some cases, they had spent tens of millions of dollars and decided to stop a project, called our public sector healthcare IT folks, along with strategy and operations and human capital, come in and build health insurance exchanges. Medicaid is changing the way states procure Medicaid management systems now. They're taking a modular approach. We're out in front helping advise states on what do these new procurement rules mean to them, how do they procure them, in some cases helping them write various RFPs, and in other cases sitting in a project management office to help coordinate and make sure that all these various modules and programs work together. One of my teams in Pennsylvania is doing analytics for the Medicaid agency in Pennsylvania, helping to monitor provider quality, ensuring that the providers who are required to have certain specialties within a certain distance of their clients actually do. We're using analytics to do that, to ensure that the data we're getting is right. Go ahead.
Yeah. But one of the really cool things that I do want to point out in this space specifically, and this is one of the benefits, and we quickly went through that slide where it said all of our different industries, right? In the healthcare transformation, we've seen, or started to see our practice as the public sector practice, team up with our life sciences and healthcare practice and actually holistically address the issue from both us as a public sector agency, how do we deal with moving to a managed care model or moving to ACOs and implementing them, right? But also from the provider perspective, having that on the ground knowledge of, okay, these are the providers' preferences, this is what they want as people who are teaming up with you, and really providing a 360-degree view of the issue, which is really, really cool and is leading to some really interesting work. I know Jeff, my counselor, is doing some really cool work with ACOs up in Boston, and both the state health, public sector practice, and life sciences and healthcare are teaming up on that.
One final area, I kind of mentioned this earlier, we're talking about digital technologies, constituent engagement. We're seeing more and more of our clients really interested in how to better engage constituents, how to better provide services to them. And once again, there's a data piece to this, is that I've got the data residing in these various systems and these various programs. They're now interested in starting to pull that together to better advise folks of services that they provide, or even leisure activities, right? So letting them know about national parks. States are really, really aggressively moving into this area. And I'm kind of watching this because there's a state I've been watching in a few months that is going to issue a request for proposals, which is the way states procure services. They typically can't go to Alejandro and I and say, hey, I'd like you to do this for me. They've got to competitively bid them through a request for proposal process. There's a state we're watching that is going to implement a new statewide portal, and a lot of what they want to do in this portal is really more proactively do outreach to the citizens. So here, kind of what Alejandro mentioned, one of the things we get to do is work with a commercial practice as well. So here we're going to be bringing together our change management folks. We have a Deloitte digital practice, our analytics folks. So it's going to be really, really pretty interesting solution that we can bring together to help propose and improve a state's statewide portal. So going forward, not a lot to talk about here other than the growth. And we still see a lot of growth and are very optimistic, very bullish on the state government market due to all those issues that we talked about. We feel that we'll get our fair share of advisory, strategy, and operations work as we go forward. So if you're wondering how solvent we are, I think we're feeling pretty good about the future, and we continue to grow. The other piece, as we continue to grow, we're bringing in new talent all the time, right? Because we're only as good. We don't sell a product really at the end of the day. What our clients buy are our services. A lot of times just our advice. So they're buying talent, and so we bring a lot of talent into the firm. And what we thought about, and some folks were, I think, a little interested in career model. We talked a bit about how your career is supported, but when we interview at Maxwell, we're typically bringing folks in at the consultant level. Business analyst is the level that most undergrads come in at. So last week when I was at Penn State recruiting, the folks I was bringing in were business analysts. So coming out of our MXA, our public administration schools, or master health schools, you come in as a consultant. And as a consultant, and Alejandro maybe can talk about his first consultant experience, but you'll be given a lot of responsibility early on. I mean, it's like 18 years ago, so I could give an example, but yours are probably more relevant. Maybe Alejandro, you could talk about what the consultant experience is like.
Yeah, so as John is mentioning, at the consultant level, really the expectation is you are able to manage yourself completely, and you might not have a big team that you're managing, but you are responsible for your own work. So I remember my first project, I came in, it was a transportation project. Never worked in transportation before, and they're like, okay, we have a requirements meeting with the client tomorrow. This is the process that we use to deliver placards. You're leading it. Good luck. And they give you all the paperwork, right? And that's where your counselor comes in. That's where your advisor, how do I go about doing this? And then they really do give you the leeway to grow into that, and then be the person who's okay, I am the placards person in my project, and then other people will come to you and say, oh, I have a question about the issuance of placards, I'm going to answer that. So you own your work, and it's a good opportunity. Then as you move on to the senior consultant, you start moving a little bit more from just owning your work to being responsible for developing other people, and then from then on, John can probably speak to it better than I can.
So as we move on, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I will talk about the hourglass model because it's an interesting model. Senior consultant, quite often you're kind of leading a small team. So there may be we don't have a lot of analysts on our teams because typically analysts don't come into state government practice. Our clients like a little more experienced, a little more seasoned clients because our rates are not the cheapest in the market. So if they're going to pay our rates, I've heard folks say, I don't want to pay for somebody to learn, which is fair. I mean, they're good custodians of public funds. So a senior consultant often will be out running sessions. To Alejandro's point, it's kind of progression. You're running sessions. You may have a little bit more client contact. You may lead deliverable creation, and then as you kind of progress in your career, you're a manager. Again, the teams get a little bit bigger. You're still typically on one project at this point. So up through manager, you're usually going to a project and doing a project. About the time you hit senior manager, you'll be doing multiple projects likely, and there'll be managers out running those projects. I did one project as a senior manager where I had 3 other senior managers on the project, leading threads of the project, and I was running another project. Luckily at the time they were both here in New York State. And then, you know, partner, experienced partner, director, it's partner slash director. We can talk about the differences between two a little bit, but generally, partners, principals have an equity interest in the firm. Directors, managing directors, it's my path. We don't have an equity interest in the firm, but we have the same ability to sign contracts, commit the firm, and so forth. At that point, you probably have multiple projects. As Alejandro and I were talking today, at one point this year, I had 4 projects across 2 different states. As of today, I have 2 projects across 2 states. And just kind of continue. At that level, you start to get maybe a little bit more involved in broader firm initiatives, get pulled into more strategic planning and so forth as well. A note about the kind of the hourglass model and the way it works, just so you kind of think about how you may fit into this. So at the business analyst consultant level, you're kind of coming in and we're looking for just broad sets of skills and experiences, right? We're not expecting anyone to be a health policy expert, a child support expert, but broad set of skills. Data analytics, great skill right now, right? We talk about quantitative analysis skills, logical reasoning. A lot of those skills, we're looking more at skills and experience here than any particular sort of deep content knowledge. As you progress, Alejandro is kind of right here now, right, is in addition to those skills, some leadership and some domain or content experience as well. I mean, Alejandro was learning a lot about, his client, right? So you're now, people are calling you not just because you can do all this stuff, but because you know a lot about your client's business, right? And then, kind of as you get to my level, you become a bit more of a generalist, right? So there are a couple things I know a lot about, probably just a couple, but there are probably a lot of things I know a little about. So what I'm expected to do is build a team to go and make sure that we bring the right people to respond to client needs. So that's why we refer to it as the hourglass model. Okay. This, again, we've talked mostly about this slide, kind of about how you kind of progress through the firm, the opportunities that you have. And this is the slide I actually kind of want to end on. Thank you for coming. And if there are any questions that we didn't answer, I know there was one about transportation, so I'll tackle that now. We have, for a number of years, kind of been in and out of the transportation business. Transportation agencies are not the easiest to deal with. They typically receive a lot of federal dollars and tend to be fairly insular in the way they do business. So over the years, we've built some technology systems, driver's license systems, and so forth. We've done some business process work. But we are now looking at more infrastructure sort of work as well, as states kind of grapple with those who have paid highways. Like the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission operates separate from PennDOT. Well, does that really make sense, right? They have a lot of overlapping services. So we're trying to figure out, how to help those two operate a little bit better, how to maximize what the Department of Transportation can do for the Turnpike. Turnpike commissions are interested in generating more revenue because the revenues that they have now don't cover their operations. The other thing that you're probably aware of if you're in transportation is there's huge autonomous vehicle. The ABCB area, autonomous vehicle kind of vehicles, huge ideas, right? How do we adopt legislation? How does that change the way we administer our highway programs and how citizens are going to interact? There's not a state that's not trying to grapple with a strategy around autonomous vehicles or connected vehicles. Yeah.
Is that something you collaborate with your federal office? Just because usually the federal government will set some kind of guidelines and then states will kind of tinker with that.
We do, and we collaborate a lot with the federal practice in human services area. They often get word of changes, but we collaborate with that. In the transportation space is another area we're not averse to partnering with other firms either. So down in my home state, I've been meeting with an individual who works for a huge construction engineering firm who's got a lot of deep experience and a lot of thought around CV/AV. And we've been talking about ways that we can partner because we realize that we don't always go it alone, and more often than not, we partner. We not only partner with other firms, but we partner, states often embed minority, women-owned, veteran-owned business requirements in their procurement. So every project we work on, we're partnering with local firms to help either complement or supplement our services. Yeah.
One question that I had is particularly for the role of consultant. I'm not speaking for everyone, but for me personally, as excited as I am for the consulting industry, I did come fresh out of undergrad. So is there a place for people who are fresh out of undergrad who are getting their MPP or MPA to be consultants with Deloitte?
I can take that.
Go ahead.
I can fresh out of undergrad. So yes, I'm here. Yeah, no, so it's a fair question. Within the consultants, I'll say specifically for people coming from the MPX degrees, you'll see a similar distribution as you probably see in Maxwell, right? Most people do have some sort of experience prior to coming to Maxwell, but there are a good amount of people that did like undergrad to grad school to a consultant. So there is definitely space for it. The firm definitely supports it. I know my onboarding advisor was also someone who had just come from undergrad, so they do want to pair you up with someone who's had similar experiences. But the short answer is that it's not something you really need to be worried about. It's as long as you have the skills, as long as you have the leadership qualities, right, and you do well in your interviews, like it's not like, oh, you just came straight from undergrad, that's not going to happen. It's more like what you actually bring to the table, and then once you're in the firm, they give you the tools to succeed. So not something you worry about.
Yeah, at Alejandro's point, he, for an example, really maximized his undergrad experience doing some leadership things. I mean, he was in a group that consulted to the mayor of Harrisburg, and everyone knows Harrisburg. Harrisburg needs a lot of consulting help. So it really, you know, it's just straight undergrad. That's kind of that's a little bigger hurdle to overcome. But if it's undergrad plus, you know, how have you maximized internships? You know, what sort of leadership experiences have you had? So it is a full person, but most people here kind of have that. But it's really thinking about, you just can't put Maxwell on your undergrad institution on a resume and have that carry the day. Think about those other things that you've done that are additive, and think about how they relate to the types of work we're doing, either from a skills basis or leadership. Skills and leadership are very, very important. So think about, when you're thinking about how you're casting things, in terms of what skills do I have, what sort of leadership do I have, you know, how does that translate into the stuff that John and Alejandro and tomorrow Sadie talked about? Yes?
You talked about some of the travel requirements for especially consultants. How does the travel requirements and overall travel schedule change as you kind of move up in the firm?
For many years, and some of this is based on geography, I would say that Alejandro didn't take some sage advice from somebody I know and join the Harrisburg practice. So, and I use that as a very specific example because within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have a multi-year relationship with the Commonwealth doing work. So there are many people who have joined the firm and drive back and forth to their client every day. We have people in some other offices who do that as well. But by and large, people are traveling, you know, shorter or longer distance. Alejandro's point earlier is true though. We rarely, if ever, will say we want someone in Harrisburg on a project in Sacramento. I mean, generally that just doesn't happen because we have skills in those areas. So most of your travel is going to be within a geographic region. And you're going to be going to the same project likely until the time you're a manager. Then as a senior manager, it's likely your travel could pick up a bit more. And as a partner managing director, even a little bit more. I have weeks where, and these are not common weeks, but I have weeks where I'm in 3 cities a week. Typically though, I'm on my project in Harrisburg, project in Indiana, and then maybe some other firm stuff. But again, depending on where you go, which office you go to, they may have a local project, and it's cheaper for everyone if we have people from the local projects working there. But up through manager, probably the single spot. A lot of predictability where you're going every week. Senior manager on to partner director, you might have multiple cities.
Yeah, like the usual thing, it's called the 3-4-5 schedule, especially like for like consultants, senior consultants. So you're gonna be away from home 3 nights, right, at the client site, 4 days, and then 5 days working. And I will say, I've been fortunate. I know it's true. I did not take someone's sage advice and move to Harrisburg. But I'm not a huge fan of travel, right? So both of my clients have been relatively close. And I looked for those opportunities because I knew that's what I wanted. And the firm understands that and is usually pretty supportive as long as you're able to find that and build your network around those areas. And then even if you are traveling, like I know a lot of the people that I've worked with who travel usually to like Atlanta or sometimes Pennsylvania and like kind of in this Ohio, Chicago kind of thing, general vicinity. They're pretty good about making sure that you're back in the office on Fridays from like leadership down. Because they know that, especially when you're first starting as a consultant, it's really important that you have that community within your office, and they make an effort to make sure that happens. So, yeah, if you like to travel, like you'll love it. Like there's a lot of opportunities to it, but it's something that if you're not like super gung ho about, you can definitely find ways to lessen the impact on your personal life.
Yeah, and to Eleanor's point, we typically will bid that we're going to have a team on site for 4 days. Some clients do require 5 days a week. I did a project here some years ago with the New York Division of Budget. It's a short project, but due to the nature of the project, they wanted us on site 5 days a week. But even with that, we worked out a coverage schedule so that we had people coming in Monday through Thursday and others coming in like Tuesday to Friday. And even within that, we have from our CEO down a predictability and flexibility program, so that barring client requirements, because client requirements are client requirements. We try, but sometimes they're unyielding, and for good reason. We do a predictability and flexibility program as well, so that if you've got some obligation, like I'm on the board of directors, and if you're on a local board and you need to be home like one Thursday a month instead of staying on the client site until 4, you need to leave a little bit earlier, you can kind of work those things out. We have, some folks don't want to do email or within a certain area, they want to black out email periods. So we try to make every experience, predictable and flexible as we can within the client requirements, because we realize if we don't, folks, it's not going to be a good experience, and really great talent is going to lead the firm, and that's not our goal at all. So, yeah.
On the consulting level, what levels of leadership do you tend to work with in your client organization? Like you're working in DHS in New Hampshire. Yep. Who do you work with on a day-to-day basis?
I will say it depends on the individual and it depends on the project. I'll talk about my experience personally. When my first project, I was working mostly with like director, so area director, so either like the LTSS unit director or the director of a specific agent or department within the agency, that sort of level. And then as I went through my first year into my second year and like started preparing for promotion, it started moving more towards those people as well as the agency leads and that level of people. So you do get a lot of face time with the client regardless of your level. Analysts, probably a little bit less so, mainly because they're in like unknown quantities, so it's like, I don't really want to put you in front of the client, I don't know what you're going to say. But as you grow, the project gets to know you, you do get a lot of face time with like the actual direct client, which is really cool because it's people who have a lot of experience, definitely much more experience than I do, and you get to see them working like face to face with you, and you learn a lot from them.
And it's not terribly uncommon for projects to have you come into a meeting. You may not be out in front, but kind of helping support a meeting. Like I always like to have senior consultants in every meeting I had. So the New York example, we did a project and we had worked across state human services agencies. Every month we had a steering committee meeting, and the director or deputy director of that human services agency was sitting around the table. A consultant or senior consultant was in the room. They might have just been driving the PowerPoint. They might have been taking meeting minutes. But early on, getting that sort of exposure to leadership is really good. You start to also think about what's important to them, which helps you when you're writing deliverables and creating presentations. But from early on, to Alejandro's point, you'll be working with clients. Early on, it's usually the client's subject matter experts, right? The folks who know their business really well, and you'll be sitting side by side with them. And that can be a little scary as well, because they have been doing their job for many years, and know it better than anyone, and you're there to kind of help them figure out, in some cases, how to do it better. But yeah, client contact from very early on is the goal. Yeah.
So this is from my experience back in India and Bangladesh that compared to working with the private clients, we felt slightly more challenging working with the government because the size was huge, there was a lot of ambiguity, the structures were not clean, and at times when we used to deliver the projects, we were not always maintaining the highest of the metrics we would design. So do we feel a similar challenge in US working with the public and the government clients in that space? Is it more like in the private sector, we were able to push our agenda much more quickly than compared to the public organizations?
I say it varies, and again, I'll use the experience here in New York. We had to create a new agency in the state of New York in like under 6 months. And no matter where you're at, private sector or public sector, to stand up an entirely new business unit in 6 months, you need strong teams. Many of the states you work in have very highly qualified, motivated folks, and they will move as quickly as they need to move to get the job done. I think, I had to overcome that a bit too. I think the perception of government kind of moving slower across the board is probably not true. I mean, will you have individuals? The one thing I would say about the government work is that there are often more layers of oversight and it's more the layers of oversight that will slow things down. For instance, even the budgeting process, right? I have friends who do strategy work and operations work in the commercial sector, and the CFO will stand in front of the finance group and say, we're doing a cost reduction project, get on board or go home, and off they go. You don't do that in government, but it doesn't in any way reflect motivation or incentive. It's just it's a bureaucracy in process. But when it needs to move, it moves. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like there is, so and for good reason, right? There is a good level of bureaucracy in government, and there are a lot of checks and balances, and that does slow things down. But especially when you are against a solid deadline that's tight, the client will work right beside you, whatever hours need to get done, and they will help you move forward. So.
Yeah, I've had clients emailing me on the weekends, and one of the things we try and do is not do email on the weekends, part of the whole predictability and flexibility. I've had clients that had emailed me over the weekend. Had another client who wanted to schedule calls on Saturdays, and we did it. But yeah, I think we're seeing a very professional group of folks that we tend to work with out in the agencies. Yeah.
So you sort of alluded to a little bit that after you sort of become an expert in sort of your client, how frequently do you change clients, or how many clients do you have sort of over a period of time? Like, do you constantly go back to the same group, or is it varied?
I mean, I'll say it depends. I know I said that a lot, but it really does. If you have a client that you really like, that you get along with, where you are a subject matter expert or you understand the domain, and you can work it out with project leadership, you can be on a client for a long time. Now, you'll be doing very different things at that client site for that amount of time, but I've been in New Hampshire for 2 years now, right? That's not like the norm, I would say, but it's also not like, whoa. So I've done a lot of different things in New Hampshire, but I like that. So I've tried to keep it that way, and then I use my other development and practice hours to get to work with people like John and get to work with other sector leadership, so that I'm still in the know as to what's going on outside of it. But most projects, I'd say, 6 months-ish. There are definitely some that are really quick turnaround, 4 to 5 weeks, and there are some that are a little bit longer, like mine. But for the most part, it's 6 months.
Yeah, and a really important point you made about even the longer term one is that you will do multiple roles within that project. So don't anticipate, because it's a 1-year project, that you're going to be doing the same thing on day 364 that you do in day 1. You'll move through a variety of roles, and in fact, you you kind of have to, right, to progress your career. And I think most of us get into this to do like different things as well. So there's what the firm requires and kind of what you want. And we always try and mesh the two of those where we can. Yeah.
Can you talk generally about a time where you had a conflict with a client and how that was handled, specifically because your client is sort of your boss, but you also have a boss back at the office, and the distance can be a challenge between in terms of addressing that situation.
Do you want to take one? And I'll take
sure.
one?
Well, so honestly, like, I don't feel like I have a boss back in the office.
I was going to
To
say,
be fully honest with you, so like
that was going to be my first.
yeah. So there is a project director, right, who is like the client counterpart, and most of the times, I've been fortunate with my client. Like, there's a reason why I've been in New Hampshire for a little bit, right? I love it. It's great. So most of the times when there's been like some sort of disagreement or something that we need to work through, whether it be on like the personal side because I had commitments, or on like the professional side because there's a disagreement as to like what had to be done. I've talked with my like project manager or my deputy project manager, and then I've had a conversation with the client and like figured it out. From like the firm perspective, it's always client delivery first, and most of the clients understand like this is a project that you're on and there's a whole other thing, and they work with project leadership to make sure that you can handle the firm expectations and the client expectations, but there's no like boss back at the firm. Like, this is one of the things I do really like about Deloitte. They really emphasize like you owning your own career. So you get into the firm, right, and then you get on your project, and then it's up to you to really like build that network and figure out what is it that you want to do and how you want to go. And you'll have people that'll help you, but it's up to you to take that initiative. So there's no one like with their thumb on you saying, oh, like it's 12:30, Ollie, you're not on the client site or anything like that.
Right. So that's part of the whole build your brand.
And as far as like the client, I'll take the client piece of that being ours. We not every firm calls their clients clients. There are a number of firms who call their clients customers. There's a reason we refer them as clients is we are very much relationship based and relationship focused. So the goal is, right, that you're doing projects collaboratively with the client. So I was on a call before I came here this morning with my client counterpart who's a sponsor for the project. And it's to the point now where neither one of us wants to hurt the other one's feelings. They're doing a procurement, and there are going to be two vendors competing for a very hotly contested. This is likely to be a $60 to $70 million procurement. Our firm knows the two vendors who are competing. These are technology vendors. We've partnered with them in the past. The client would like us to be in the room while they're doing evaluations of the demonstrations that the vendor is doing, and didn't want to ask us to be in the room because he didn't want us to feel like he was pushing on us too hard. I, on the other hand, went into the call not wanting to push to have our people in the room because I didn't want to create a problem with him, because I was afraid if these vendors saw Deloitte in the room, they were going to think we were influencing the evaluation. So that's kind of where we want these relationships to go. And the good thing about getting there and building that trust is that when there is an issue, it's not a screaming match. It is on the facts, it's being transparent. And I would say that, and this is at any, from the day you're a consultant, if you see an issue or a risk, get it. You may not want to take it to your client, right away, but you want to get it to your project team, because our clients are generally much more receptive to you bringing them something early on, along with the resolution. We rarely just say, hey, that's messed up. We will go to them with a resolution. And that's not to say that there are some clients that see themselves as the boss of Deloitte. I mean, I've been there, and then you just kind of deal with it, right? But that's not really the type of situation we strive for. Yep.
So I have two questions. So one is at the consultant, senior consultant level, how much of people are involved with cross-selling, like being a part of consulting, you get into team members with advisory, or even tax, audit, and then make a joint proposal and pitch for a larger client bid. And second would be, in terms of consulting work, do we stop at the when we give the management advice, or do we at times go for the implementation support also? And there's an annuity business linked to it.
I mean, so we definitely go all the way, right? We do give the advice, and we do have the people that will do the actual implementations. On the cross-functional area, I've worked with a lot of people in both human capital and technology. There is, I know, an AERS team on site. I haven't worked much with them, so I haven't had much experience with that. I honestly haven't looked for it either. I wanted to make sure I understood the consulting business first, right? So I did work with a lot of human capital tech people, but not necessarily across the functions myself. I don't know what your experience is.
Yeah, that's kind of norm. Some of this is how the client buys the services, right? They'll buy a new system, and maybe they'll separately do something else. Sometimes they want to segregate duties when they implement. But the area that we most often go to business together is with the advisory folks who do cybersecurity. Because when we're building big, complex systems, cybersecurity is very important. So in my project in Pennsylvania, we have 5 cybersecurity folks in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania working with security, along with our team who's now maintaining applications. We go even beyond the implementation. A lot of times the states will retain us, if you're a technology practitioner, to provide the maintenance operations on the system. I think we've been in Pennsylvania for probably close to 20 years, and the systems that we built have been live for many years, and now day to day their team's maintaining those operations, and it's a joint team. So we do it. And we have this slogan about the green dot. I mean, the preference is to go to a client with all of our services. But clients don't always have the budget for all of our services, and sometimes they have very valid reasons for splitting up the way they buy the services. Okay. Yeah.
How easy is it to move horizontally within the firm, whether it's across the competency areas within the sector or from practice to practice?
That also depends. What I'd say is, when you join the firm as a consultant, you're gonna want to spend at least 2 years at the level within that service area. So when you come in as strategy and operations, you want to spend at least 2 years there, because to move, this is kind of an HR, so I don't want to delve too much in HR because I'm not an HR practitioner. But I've had folks who have done this. The firm's going to look for a couple years of track record, right? Because if you're not performing well in strategy practice, you're probably not going to perform on the human capital practice. But the firm's going to look for some body of work to help with that decision. And then there should be a business case as well to do that. Moving across clients is encouraged. I mean, as Alejandro mentioned, Alejandro I'm sure his team has been pretty persuasive because he's a very, very high performer, and having him stay there. But Alejandro has options to go do other things with other projects. He just mentioned some of his rationale for staying. But if you want to rotate to another project, say you want to try a human services project, and people do, and then you want to go do a project in core government, which is or health, you can do that. And that's again that hourglass thing that we showed. That's the whole goal behind this. Here's where you want to get the broad experiences, and this is broad from sort of client contact. Now, some people will join the human services project from day one and love it and say, I never want to leave, and that's totally cool. But you might want to try and do another project. This is absolutely the time to do that, because by the time you start to move into this area, people are going to want to know, what's your value proposition, and that's usually phrased in terms of the types of clients you serve and the services. Did that hit it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, sitting here a long time. All done? All right. Well, thanks.
You want to walk through the dates?
Oh, maybe you can walk through these.
Sure.
We do have some dates.
They're at the end.
I have to go the other way.
So what?
Dates.
Oh, dates.
Yeah.
Dates.
Important dates.
Oh, right.
Important dates.
Well, sorry, can you go? I wanted to see the map for a hot
Oh,
second.
you want to see the map?
Yeah.
All right, so here's the map. This is what's on the map here is generally where we have some state government presence and/or state government projects. Hunter's from Boston. I'm from, as we know, the capital of the public sector, which is Harrisburg. And I joke about that, but the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is one of our largest accounts in the firm. We have over 500 people on a daily basis serving the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And a lot of firm leadership sits in Harrisburg or has come through Harrisburg. So it's a good spot to be. Now Hunter went to Messiah College just outside of Harrisburg.
So I still count.
But we have an office in Chicago, not as much public sector representation, an office in Austin. I would say that, if you get to the point of applying, I probably wouldn't apply to Austin. We have a pipeline to LBJ. A lot of the LBJ folks like to go to Austin. Sacramento, again, on the other side of the country, a little harder for the business case. But from Maxwell, we've had folks in Chicago. Atlanta's a growing office as well. Climate's a little better than Syracuse, but I prefer Syracuse. McLean is a little iffy, I would say. But Harrisburg, New York, Boston, very strong. This quarter, very strong in public sector and public sector leadership.
I have, two questions regarding that. One, I am from Atlanta, and I was curious about some of the clientele that they have and how much that includes the government of Georgia. And two, I've noticed that for a lot of the Big Four, they have their big offices specifically in the town of McLean, and I have no idea why.
Well, we actually, our big office is in Arlington. I'm going to be there on Monday. And we also still, I believe, have a Pennsylvania Avenue address. So we've got a heavy concentration. And did you mention, someone mentioned it from Richmond. We have a Richmond office that doesn't do a whole lot of public sector work. But in the DC area, and what we didn't do on here was put our federal offices, because we're here from state and local. Mm-hmm. But we've got McLean, we've got Roslyn, we've got, I still believe in DC. I don't think we moved out of the DC office. Atlanta, Sadie, tomorrow, spend some time with Sadie. Sadie's been working in Atlanta, and she has done some fantastic work helping the Human Services Agency. We built a huge system for them. But in addition to that, they've changed, and this is what you should tell anyone who's interested in human services. Talk to Sadie about the work that she has done helping improve the service delivery to human services folks in Georgia. There's some other smaller projects, but I would say that...
But is it mostly within Atlanta and the state government of Georgia?
She's getting out to all the assistance offices within the state.
But it is, her client is the DPH, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, and we've done a higher ed project at Georgia State. But talk with Sadie about the work she's doing with human services. It is really pretty groundbreaking and pretty impactful. In addition to her trapeze stuff, don't forget that.
Through this application process, is our preference as to where we want to be located to human account, or how does that work?
We're not here for the talent side, but what I will, if history, and Kelly, if history is a predictor, I believe you're going to be able to select 3 potential office locations. So you'll have the ability to pick from 3. And we try and accommodate that. I think the thing though, and we can talk more about this, after we break, is if I were making an office selection, I really would encourage you to make an office selection based on where you've got strong public sector leadership. It's a big firm, and it's easy to get lost in an office that doesn't have a lot of leadership, I would say, given the size of the firm. But I mean, these are all fair game. I would just say that once we get past Illinois, probably not a great business case. Obviously here, as I mentioned, this corridor is great. Chicago, Atlanta are fine as well. If I were picking, I would pick Harrisburg first. So should we get to the dates? Any other questions on the map? All right. We didn't see Anchorage, Alaska, so I wanted to do Anchorage, and Honolulu's not on there either, so we're fair. So the dates, Alejandro.
Yeah. So first date tomorrow from 10 to 12, I believe. I don't remember where, but it's somewhere here. We are going to have the Cracking the Case session. Highly encourage you guys to come and check it out. We're basically going to walk through a little bit more about what the application process looks like, and then talk through like, what is a case interview? Like, how do you actually approach it? Walk through a few examples. And Sadie's gonna be here, and she's great, so come meet her. It'll be fun.
And it's a Friday, so come casual, right? We're not evaluating anyone
Yes.
tomorrow, so no need. In fact, I may not wear a jacket tomorrow, so don't feel compelled to come in business dress tomorrow. It's a Friday. Don't bring a keg though.
Save that for a little bit later, but tell us where you take it. So the resume submission deadline is going to be on October 20th. So that's when you want to have your submissions by. Between October 20th and October 30th, we'll be reviewing the talent team will be reviewing the resumes, and then from October 30th to November 1st, for the people that have received an offer to come and interview, we're going to be doing one-on-one sessions to prepare for the case challenge. So we'll provide some information about like previous cases that we have done, and then you'll get probably like half an hour with one of us who's come from Maxwell and who's gone through it, to just talk through like how, like, give me like, you know, the nitty-gritty, how do I go about it, do a practice case or whatever you need to prepare for that interview. Highly recommend doing that. I did it, I helped with it a couple years ago, and everybody that I talked to said it was really helpful. So, and I don't think that was me, I think it's just the idea that it is good. Then the first round of interviews is going to be on November 2nd. The first round of interviews is going to be the behavioral interview and then a shorter case interview. And then the second round of interviews is going to be on November 3rd, and that will be just the one longer case interview, which I believe has two.
Yeah, there'll be two of us in the room for that. Yeah.
Exactly. So to apply, go online, careers.deloitte.com, and then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to John. Sadie and I will be around as well, so if you want our contact information, feel free to ask for it. But for the most part, application process-wise, John's your person.
So also, you have to apply through the Maxwell Career Management System, and you have to upload your resume. If you read the instructions on how to apply, if anybody has any difficulty doing that, either stop in or give me a call. And
You need to go through both places, so both
Yes.
our website and the Deloitte website.
And the Deloitte website as well. So they have another form that they do. So it's like a double process.
It's worth it.